I hadn't been back to Eureka in nearly 2 years. The air smelled the same, salt, old pine, and whatever Camille always sprayed on the porch chairs. Driving into the neighborhood felt like rewinding a tape I thought I'd tossed out. Familiar, but faded. Grandma's birthday was the reason I came. 86 this year. I brought a small framed photo of just her and me at Shelter Cove, waves in the background, both of us smiling like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. It felt too sentimental, maybe, but it was honest. Inside, the house hadn't changed. The same tan walls, the same lace curtains, even the creak in the second stair. But something in me knew. I wasn't coming home. I was entering their world, and I wasn't sure they'd remembered to make room for me. The kitchen was crowded. Della was holding court, loud and bright, like she always was. Camille flitted from corner to corner, orchestrating everything like a conductor too obsessed with the performance to see the music had gone flat. I smiled, nodded, hugged when I had to. My seat was at the far end of the table. I didn't fight it. Grandma sat at the head, glowing in soft lavender, her hands folded like a woman who'd lived too long to care what anyone thought anymore. Around her, everyone leaned in. But not me. I watched from a distance, smiled when expected, said, when prompted. The performance was smooth, almost too smooth. Then came dessert. Grandma turned toward me with her usual warmth, like I hadn't missed a single Sunday dinner in the past 2 years. "How's the beach house, sweetheart? I hope it's bringing you peace." I dropped my spoon, clatter on porcelain. Eyes turned, not a sound. My stomach clenched. "What house?" I asked. Camille blinked, then reached for a serving spoon. "Grandma, did you try the lemon tart?" Della smiled and sipped her wine. There it was, that flash of panic before the mask went back on. And just like that, they moved on, past the plates, laughed at some joke about Uncle Jared's new boat. I stayed still. "You were always too independent for things like that," Della whispered during a toast, barely turning her head. "We figured you wouldn't care." Her tone was silk, like she thought I'd thank her for cutting me out. I didn't respond. But inside, something cracked. Not loud, just deep. I remembered sitting with Grandma on that beach years ago, her hand on mine, telling me that everyone deserved a place to return to, even if they never did. I guess I believed her. And now, apparently, so did Della. That night played back in my head like a skipping record. All the missed calls, unanswered texts. The "we're busy this holiday." Camille's voicemail last summer. "Don't worry about coming home. Nothing big this year." All of it. I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been removed. They knew. All of them. And Grandma? Her eyes stayed soft, unbothered, like she hadn't just detonated a grenade under the dinner table. "They buried the truth under politeness and pie," I muttered to myself in the bathroom mirror later. When I came back to the table, I raised my glass. "To family," I said. "The ones who always remember what matters." A few clinks, some forced smiles. Inside, I was shaking. Outside, I blended in. I woke up before the sun, still wearing yesterday's cardigan, the scent of lemon pie somehow stronger now than it was at dinner. I stayed in bed for a long time, not because I was tired, but because it was quieter that way. The room used to be mine, photos of me on the shelf, my books stacked by the window. Now it felt like a spare, not a guest room, a room for someone forgotten, but tolerated. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the framed photo I gave Grandma last night. It was on a side table, turned halfway toward the wall like someone had placed it down in a hurry and didn't bother to adjust it. I wondered if she'd seen it, or if it just didn't matter anymore. I kept hearing her voice in my head, soft and warm. "How's the beach house, sweetheart?" That question hadn't been innocent, or maybe it had, just not for me. Everyone else seemed fine with what happened. I was the only one feeling like I'd walked into a party I wasn't actually invited to. Mid-morning, I pulled out my phone, scrolling through old photos, old messages. I didn't expect to find anything. Habit, more than curiosity. Then I landed on Della's Instagram. That's when the ache started. Photo after photo. The same windows. The same porch railings. the deck chairs that I remember helping Grandma pick out. She'd tagged it. Hashtag my retreat, dated nearly 2 years back. More posts followed. Brunch spreads, yoga setups, New Year's fireworks over Shelter Cove. So grateful for family legacy, one caption read. Family legacy. I hadn't even been given a key. How many holidays do you have to miss before your name fades from the family property lines? I threw on a coat and went for a walk. Needed air that didn't smell like polished wood and fake smiles. I ended up near the beach. Familiar path. Same breeze. I hadn't planned to see anyone. Mrs. Corbin spotted me first. She lived down the road from Grandma for decades. Eldon? My goodness, you've been away too long. I smiled, made some small talk, asked about her dog. She asked if I was back for good. I said no, just visiting. Then she said it, light, casual, like discussing weather. Your sister told us she inherited the place. We all thought it was hers. She's been such a lovely host. My hands clenched the coffee cup. It didn't spill, but I almost wished it had. Would have explained the shake. Inherited. That word echoed. Not staying at, not using, not visiting. Inherited. I mumbled something polite, turned back toward the road. It's one thing to be erased inside a home, another to be rewritten outside of it. Walking back, I couldn't stop thinking about that summer night 5 years ago. Grandma and I sat on the beach house deck. She sipped peppermint tea, said she'd been thinking about what she'd leave behind. I don't have a lot of years left, honey. But I want you to have something that feels like peace. The way she said it, like she knew that's what I needed more than anything. I promised I'd take care of it, like I'd take care of her. Back then, I believed it would be mine. I didn't think I'd have to fight for it. By the time I got home, they were all in the sunroom. Camille in her linen blouse, Della laughing, something about spring renovations at the house. Camille said she might help fund a new garden. Della suggested a yoga deck. I stood in the doorway, unseen. Camille glanced up. You hungry, sweetheart? We've got leftovers. I shook my head, sat down, listened. No one brought up last night. Not Grandma's question. Not my answer. Not the silence after. I almost said something, almost opened my mouth and laid it all out. But I didn't. I needed more than anger. I needed proof, timing, strategy. I wasn't invisible. I was being written out, and I needed to read the script before I rewrote it. That night, while brushing my teeth, I checked the email linked to my old records. A place I hadn't opened in months. One message. We need to talk. I think there's something you should know about your grandma's will. Theo Ramsey. I hadn't heard that name in years. Grandma's old lawyer. I met Theo the next morning at a coffee shop just off the highway. He looked older, grayer than I remembered. Less of the clean-cut lawyer who used to drop in for Sunday lunch with estate folders and gentle jokes. We didn't hug. We barely even made eye contact until we sat down. He didn't waste time. Your grandmother amended her will in 2018, he said, sliding a folder across the table. You were named the sole heir to the beach house. My stomach didn't drop. It twisted, slow and deliberate. She was very clear. It wasn't just a gift. It was her way of making sure you were never left out again. I flipped open the folder. Legal stamps, notarized signatures, everything in order. She sent copies to the family, he continued, voice low. About a month later, communication stopped. Calls went unanswered. Emails bounced. I figured. They didn't want reminders. He looked up then. Apologetic, but not surprised. I nodded. Once. No tears. No rage. Just confirmation. They didn't forget to tell me. They decided I didn't need to know. I drove back in silence, gripping the wheel tighter than I should have. The legal copy of the will sat in the passenger seat, sealed in a manila envelope that felt heavier than it should have. At the house, Camille was out. I asked Grandma if I could help sort through some of her old things. Photos, letters, cards. She smiled, said yes, waved me toward the den with that same soft hand that used to braid my hair when I was 5. Half an hour later, I found the card. 2 years ago, my birthday. The one that had felt off, like someone else had written it in a rush. It was in a floral envelope, Same brand Grandma always used. I held it up to the light. The ink was uneven, spaced strangely. The message short, too short. I got a flashlight from the hallway drawer, angled it just right. That's when I saw the faint impressions beneath the surface. Light scratches under the top layer of ink. I hope you enjoy the beach house. It's yours now. The sentence had been removed. No crossing out, no tear, just erased, rewritten. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just sat there, staring at the card like it had come from a ghost. Camille must have reworded it, maybe printed a new version, maybe convinced Grandma to change the message at the last second, or maybe she hadn't. Maybe she just thought it was better this way. And now that message, one that might have made me feel seen, had been buried beneath whiteout and soft lies. I took the card, closed it gently, and placed it in my bag. Later that evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I found Camille's old phone charging in the hallway, the one she'd retired last year but still used for storing family photos and syncing backups. I took it into my room, not out of revenge, out of survival. Scrolling through archived messages, it didn't take long. Text from Grandma, dated 3 weeks before the will was changed. Please tell her gently, she deserves to know. No response, just read. She'd seen it. She'd stayed silent. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I just stared at the screen until the light dimmed and my reflection blinked back at me. Love doesn't always get stolen with force. Sometimes it gets edited out. I pulled the framed photo from my bag, the one I'd brought as a gift, the one left untouched on the side table. On the back, in faint pencil, nearly rubbed away, for when you forget that you're seen, love, G. I ran my thumb over the curve of the G, swallowed the tightness in my throat. Grandma had always made me feel like I belonged, even when the rest of them made sure I knew I didn't. I remembered something she said years ago. A legacy isn't what you leave. It's what you refuse to let be taken. I finally cried, not out of bitterness, but because the difference between Grandma's love and Camille's betrayal felt sharp enough to cut through bone. The next morning at breakfast, Camille chirped about spring cleaning. Della joked about a yoga deck on the patio. Something modern, she said. Eldon probably wouldn't even care. I smiled. But now it wasn't the uncertain kind. I listened, watched, calculated. Every invoice, every edit, every folder. They'd had years to write this story. I was just now picking up the pen. That night, as the dishes were drying in the rack and Camille's voice faded down the hallway, my phone lit up. Aunt Loretta. I think it's time you heard what your grandmother told me, she said. I've kept a recording. I left the house just after breakfast. Said I needed to check on some paperwork for my voter registration. Nobody questioned it. I guess they thought I was the kind of person who still made time for civic duty even while visiting home. That lie suited me just fine. The county building was mostly empty when I got there. The woman at the counter barely looked up as I handed her a request for tax documents tied to the beach house. I half expected her to come back and say there was nothing under my name, but she didn't. She returned with a folder. Inside were 3 years' worth of records, all in my name, Eldon Ray Halden, listed as the taxpayer of record for a property I didn't even have keys to. All payments had been made from a trust account managed by Camille and Frank. The address for mailed notices, Della's home. I thanked the clerk and walked out into the parking lot, folder under my arm, mind spinning. It wasn't illegal, technically. That made it worse. It was careful, designed to leave no obvious blood on anyone's hands. I was the legal name, but never the real owner, not to them. Driving back, I stopped at a gas station. I didn't need gas. I needed a moment not filled with their voices. Back at the house, I walked through the hall that smelled like fabric softener and history. Along the walls, portraits hung. Weddings, birthdays, holidays. At the end was a new frame I hadn't seen before. It was from last summer, the beach house. Camille was smiling in a sun hat, Frank behind the grill. Della held her youngest, and Grandma sat in her rocker looking peaceful. I wasn't in it. I stared at it for a while, remembering what they told me that weekend. The house is being fumigated. Better not come. I had believed them. Below the photo was a label. 4 generations, 1 home. I whispered, 1 home. Minus 1 truth. By the time brunch rolled around, the sunroom was filled with clinking glassware and the hum of Camille's showmanship. And of course, Della's been so dedicated, she's really put her heart into that place, Camille said, her voice just loud enough to carry. Oh, painting the guest room was nothing, Della chimed in with a casual wave. I'm thinking of maybe adding a yoga space next spring. Laughter, nods, approval. I was sitting 3 chairs away. They spoke of my inheritance like I was already dead. Camille turned to me for the first time that morning. You know you're always welcome, honey. I smiled. Of course. I'm sure the house knows that too. That evening, after everyone had scattered to their routines, I took my laptop to the back room and began compiling. Scanned tax documents, the birthday card Camille had altered, the unread message from Grandma's phone. I started labeling folders. Inheritance timeline, erasure patterns. It was no longer just about me. It was about clarity, about proof, about leaving no room for polite amnesia. They built a story. I was assembling the evidence. I wouldn't win by shouting. I'd win by being undeniable. Dinner that night was quieter. Frank mentioned a spring event they were planning at the beach house. A sort of open house for the church folks. Show them how far we've come. Camille nodded, adding, It'll be a lovely way to honor what Della's built. I looked up from my plate. Will it be under my name or hers on the flyer? Forks paused. Frank cleared his throat. Camille coughed, not because she needed to. Della's smile tightened, then vanished. No one answered. That was all the answer I needed. After dessert, we cleared plates and rinsed glasses. Camille rinsed hers longer than necessary. Della retreated to her room with one of the kids. Frank took his newspaper to the den. My phone buzzed under the table. A text from Aunt Loretta. I have the recording. Meet me tomorrow. It's time. Loretta asked me to meet her at the little park by the marina. She said it would be quiet there, off the radar. When I pulled in, she was already waiting in the car, eyes scanning the lot like she didn't want to be recognized. She didn't waste time. Just handed me an old USB drive and looked straight ahead. I should have said something earlier, she muttered. But your grandma, she made me promise not to interfere. I kept that promise too long. Back in my car, I plugged the drive into my laptop. Grandma's voice filled the space. Not weak, not frail. Steady. Camille, Eldon is the only one who doesn't take from me. That house. It's my way of giving her back her place. That was it. One line. But it said everything. It wasn't just about ownership, it was about restoration. They didn't bury the truth. They locked it up because they couldn't afford what it would cost them to let it live. I sat there, laptop open on the passenger seat, eyes dry but heart tight. That kind of clarity doesn't comfort, it convicts. Back at the house, I waited until Camille left for her errands. I walked into the study she always kept closed off, called it her command center. The top drawer was locked, but the key sat inside a nearby book, right where she'd always hidden spare change. Predictable. A folder labeled Beach House Admin was inside. Invoices, plumbing repairs, roof patching, interior painting, all addressed to Eldon R. Halden. Every one of them. I didn't authorize a single fix, didn't sign a single sheet, but on paper, it looked like I'd been running the place myself. Camille had used my name like it was a decoration. Legal, sure, but gutting. You can be the name on the envelope and still be locked out of the house. That night, I found Camille alone in the kitchen. She was dicing onions, humming something under her breath. I sat across from her, said it calmly. I found the invoices. Every repair done on the house, filed under my name. She didn't pause, just kept chopping. You were busy. You live far. I didn't think you'd want to deal with it. You didn't ask. She finally looked up. It's not lying, she said, when it keeps the peace. There it was. She wasn't hiding. She was convinced she had the right. She didn't erase me with anger. She did it with elegance, smiles, niceness, control wrapped in grace, and that's what made it dangerous. I went upstairs, closed the door to my room and sat with everything, the receipts, the letters, the photos, the voice recording, and the card. That damn birthday card. I held it under the desk lamp, traced my finger across the blank space where Grandma's original line had been erased, rewritten. You always belonged here, no matter where you are. I cried, not because I was broken, but because I finally understood what I'd been trying to salvage. It wasn't about the house. It was about my place in a story they rewrote without me. That night, I didn't sleep. I organized. I scanned everything, filed it by date, color-coded folders on my desktop. One called Inheritance Timeline, one labeled Erasure Patterns, 2 USB drives, one backed up to the cloud. I wasn't doing it to yell louder. I was doing it to leave no doubt. If their silence was their shield, then truth would be mine. By morning, I was calm. At breakfast, the usual chaos, Della arguing with one of the kids, Camille checking her calendar. Then Camille cleared her throat. We're hosting a small family showcase at the beach house next week. Sort of a tribute. You're welcome to come, of course. She smiled, so smooth. Maybe say a few words if you want. I looked at her for a long time, then I nodded. I'd be honored. I spent the morning going through it all. Every email, every receipt, every photo. I opened the audio file from Loretta again and listened to Grandma's voice, clear as the ocean air outside. She said it simply. It's hers. I've never changed that decision. That line echoed as I printed the transcript, tucked it into a crisp envelope, and labeled the USB with a thick black marker. For Camille. Then I made another copy. And another. I created folders, digital and physical, titled them in a way that made it impossible to ignore. One said, Proof I was here. Another, Timeline of Silence. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. This wasn't about catching them. It was about making sure, when the moment came, no one could say I didn't have the receipts. Outside, the sky was overcast, the kind that made everything feel suspended. I stepped onto the back porch, coffee in hand, when Della walked out, holding a half-eaten apple and wearing that falsely casual air she put on when she wanted something. She leaned against the railing beside me. You've always been too sensitive, she said. I'm trying to protect you from the mess. I didn't answer. She kept going. We both know it's complicated. Maybe it's not about who owns what. Maybe it's about shared memory, not shared property. I looked out toward the trees. You think this is about a house? I asked quietly. She didn't respond. I'm not the one who's afraid of truth being seen. She straightened slightly, forced a smile, and walked back inside. That moment, that pause, was all I needed. She knew, and she knew I wasn't stepping back this time. Around noon, Loretta tapped on my door and handed me a small box. Inside was Grandma's old silver pin, a wave crest, engraved on the back, Find your ground. She wanted you to have it, Loretta said. Said you'd know when the time was right. I pinned it inside my coat, not for show, for strength. Grandma used to say, dignity doesn't yell, it just doesn't flinch. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming space I'd been pushed out of with a smile. That night, dinner was a quiet war. Camille served as usual. Della passed the salad. Frank poured wine. Then Camille spoke, gentle and calculated. You know, some people are better off not stirring old wounds. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't blink. I slid the envelope across the table. The transcript inside. Camille opened it, read silently, then looked up. So you're choosing spectacle over peace, she whispered. I met her eyes. No, I'm choosing light over shadows. She said nothing, but the air between us changed. It was no longer about suspicion. It was declaration. After dinner, I sat on my bed and packed. 2 USBs, 2 printed folders. The silver pin. I wasn't scared. I wasn't angry. I was ready, not to fight, to clarify, to correct a story that had been edited behind my back and retold in rooms I'd never been invited into. Out the window, the moon hung low over Shelter Cove. You can't keep erasing someone who's finally holding the pen, I thought. Morning came quiet, cold. I dressed slowly, picked up the folders, checked the recordings one more time. As I reached the door, Camille stood at the foot of the stairs. "You understand this changes everything," she said. I nodded. That's the point. The driveway at the beach house was already full when I arrived. Church friends, neighbors, and more than a few familiar faces from town were milling about, dressed casual but camera-ready. A fold-out table near the porch offered sparkling lemonade and brochures titled, "The Halden Legacy, Preserved by Della June Halden." I walked past it without flinching. The pin Grandma gave me sat quietly inside my coat. I could feel its weight with every step I took. Let them believe I came as a guest. Inside, the living room had been rearranged for photo displays. Pictures of Della repainting the kitchen, arranging fresh flowers, standing beside Camille with paint rollers like a DIY duo out of a lifestyle magazine. Not a single photo of me. No mention of the tax records. No one thought to ask how a house gets maintained with someone else's name on every legal line. I stood near the fireplace while Della stepped forward to give a short speech. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice smooth like she'd practiced it in the mirror. "This house meant the world to Grandma Nellie, and I've done everything I could to honor that." Camille stood beside her, beaming like she'd personally blessed every word. "Preserving family history takes effort," Della continued. "But when it's done with love, it's not work, it's legacy." The applause was polite, warm even, but not for me. As the guests dispersed into smaller conversations, I made my way to the refreshment table where a couple from the church was chatting with a man I vaguely recognized from the local paper. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet, an Airbnb receipt, printed clean, highlighted in yellow. I handed it to one of the guests. "Interesting listing, huh?" I said. "Host, Eldon R. Halden. Payout, D. Halden." The woman blinked. "Wait, so she's been renting it out?" I didn't answer. Let the page speak for itself. Others looked over, eyebrows rising, mouths beginning to form questions they hadn't thought they'd need to ask today. The air shifted. Small, quiet, but definite. And I wasn't done. Near the guest room, I saw Camille and Della chatting with a couple of older women from Grandma's knitting group. I walked up, folder in hand. Camille saw me first. Her smile twitched. "Eldon," she said, measured. "Everything okay?" "I'd like to share something," I said. I opened the folder and pulled out a copy of the loan document, one signed using my legal name to secure a business line of credit. The beach house had been used as collateral. Camille and Della had listed themselves as power of attorney. I never gave that authority. "This was filed with the county," I said, placing the paper on a nearby side table for guests to see. "Without my knowledge, using my name." Della's face drained. Camille stepped forward. "That was a formality, just standard legal processing." "You were unavailable." "You could have called," I said. Guests were watching now. "Did you ever think to ask me what I wanted for my own home?" No one spoke. "Truth doesn't need a podium," I said. "It just needs oxygen." Camille disappeared for a few minutes. When she returned, she held a folder. Brown, clean, crisp. "This is Grandma's final will," she announced to the room, naming Della the sole heir. This was her last intention. She opened the folder, revealing a page with Grandma's name at the top. I didn't flinch. Instead, I pulled out my phone, pressed play. Loretta's recording filled the air. Grandma's voice was slow, clear. "I never changed my will. It's always been for Eldon. She's the one who remembers me, not just the house." Gasps rippled through the room like someone had broken a mirror. Della looked like she might crumble. Camille didn't speak, just closed the folder and walked out to the porch. Some guests left quietly. Others lingered, unsure whether they were allowed to make eye contact with me now. A few touched my shoulder. "I didn't know," they said. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Out in the sunlight, I stood for a moment before texting Loretta. "It's over," I wrote, "but it's only starting. By the time I got home that evening, I wasn't expecting anything else. I'd said my piece. Let the air breathe. But it was sitting there, an envelope tucked under the front door. No stamp, no return address, just a logo from a law firm printed across the corner. I opened it slowly in the kitchen while the house stayed quiet. The letter was from an estate trustee, someone I'd never met, representing a legal office separate from anything Camille had waved around at the showcase. It read like a report, formal, precise, the will Camille had shown everyone. It was never filed, never recorded, contradicted the amended, notarized, legally binding copy from 2018. Filed, time-stamped, final. And that will? Mine. They included a stamped copy in the envelope, the one that named me sole heir of the beach house. It wasn't about vindication. It was the first time I didn't feel alone. I didn't tell anyone that night. I placed the folder on my desk and sat with it. Let it breathe the same way I had been trying to. Later, after Camille and Della came back from wherever they'd disappeared to after the showcase, I asked Camille to join me at the table. She did. I slid the letter across the wood, said nothing. She read it slowly, then folded it with care, set it back down like it was a napkin. "You still think this makes you the better daughter?" she said, not looking up. "No," I said. "Just the honest one." She nodded, a faint twitch in her jaw. She didn't argue. "You've always been dramatic," she muttered, eyes still down. "Some truths aren't worth exposing." "Then you shouldn't have made me hide them." She left the letter on the table when she walked out. It didn't need to be picked up again. The next morning started soft, sunlight breaking through the curtains in a way that felt almost merciful. But then Loretta called. Grandma had been found on the patio, sitting still, eyes wide, but breathing. When I arrived, she was still there, blanket around her shoulders, a mug untouched beside her. Loretta whispered that she hadn't spoken much, just said, "I trusted them to protect her. And they chose themselves." I sat beside her. She reached for my hand. "You knew," she said, "even when no one else wanted you to." Nothing more. She didn't need to say another word. The pressure of her hand in mine said enough. That quiet, aching guilt and relief. We sat there together for a long while. Later that day, I drove to the courthouse, submitted a formal statement. I didn't ask for the house to be returned. It already was, legally, permanently. But I asked for a legal note to invalidate Camille's false submission, for a record that said, "This happened, and here's the truth." I filed for legal protection against anyone using my name on anything financial ever again. It wasn't about retaliation. It was about leaving no room for re-editing. Frank caught me in the hallway as I walked back in. "I didn't know everything," he said, "but I knew enough." And I said nothing. I didn't respond. But I didn't look away. Some silences don't need filling. Della left the next day. No goodbye. Just gone. Camille avoided the rest of us. Doors closed, curtains drawn. The house didn't feel broken. It felt quiet, honest. Loretta stayed close. Helped Grandma with her meds. Kept the air light when it wanted to be heavy. That evening, I sat on the porch, looking out toward the water. Thought of every choice that brought me back here. Thought about how I used to walk these boards as a kid, thinking I'd always be welcome. And now, after everything, I wasn't looking for welcome. I was looking for truth. Just before bed, I pulled one of Grandma's old cookbooks from the shelf. Flipping through it, something slipped out, a folded piece of paper, soft with time. I opened it. The house was never just a home. It was proof you belonged, and no one can take that from you again. I started in the attic, pulled down boxes that hadn't been touched in decades and probably shouldn't have been. Dust settled into my skin like old regret. Inside, I found what you expect in a house like this: yellowed papers, broken lamp parts, holiday decorations no one wanted to throw away. But buried under it all were Grandma's sketches. Rough pencil lines of what she once imagined for the house. A reading nook under the stairwell. A screened porch for summer evenings. A garden layout she'd scribbled on the back of a grocery receipt. None of it was ever built, but it was all still here. I ran my hand across one page like I was touching her thoughts. In a bundle of ribbon, I found old photographs. Polaroids faded at the edges, most with her handwriting on the back. Eldon's 8th. First beach fire. One of them was just the porch, empty, early morning light casting long lines across the railing. I sat on the floor for a long time. You don't inherit a home. You inherit responsibility for memory. Later, I moved to the kitchen to reorganize drawers. Something about bringing order to mess helped me breathe. I found the letter in one of her cookbooks, wedged between 2 pages of banana bread recipes. It was folded twice. On the outside, in soft pencil, she'd written, "For E." I unfolded it slowly. "This place was never just about wood and stone," she wrote. "It was about giving you back a name they tried to shorten." I read the line twice, then again, out loud to the walls that had heard every lie said in their shadow. She didn't give me a house. She gave me back the parts of me I was told to dim. I stepped outside with it still in my hand. Frank was on the porch, nursing his usual coffee in silence. He didn't look up when I sat down beside him. "I was proud of you leaving," he said after a while. "I just didn't know how to say it without hurting your mother." He handed me an envelope. Inside were photos of me and Grandma I hadn't seen in years. One from that beach picnic, one from the day she let me paint the mailbox blue. He'd kept them. I didn't ask why. "I didn't do right by you," he added. I nodded. Didn't forgive? Didn't fight? Sometimes grace doesn't need permission. It just needs space. A few days later, Camille and Della left. No contact, no closure. Just gone. Camille sent a letter. No return address, no salutation. Just one line. "Do what you want with it. I'm done." I filed it in a drawer. Didn't burn it. Didn't frame it. Just filed it. Loretta watched me fold it. "Some people don't burn bridges," she said. "They just never intended to cross back." I nodded again. The house was quiet, but not the way it had been. Now it breathed. I partnered with a nonprofit that supported women starting over. Survivors. Widows. Women who needed a weekend to catch their breath. We turned the guest room into a soft-lit space with quilts and journals. I named it the Nellie Room. The porch got new wood. I left Grandma's chair untouched. Under the window, I added a small plaque. "You belong here. No permission required." In the evenings, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and started to write. The first time I was erased, I didn't even notice, but the last time, I rewrote the ending. Not everything gets fixed, but some things get repurposed, not into perfection, but into purpose. Before I left for Portland, I visited Grandma's grave one last time. I placed a single seashell on the headstone. "You were the one who stayed when silence got too loud," I whispered. Then I stood at the cliff's edge, wind pulling at my coat, hair in my face, and smiled, not because it was over, but because I wasn't invisible anymore.